So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Wellbeing Wednesday. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce you to Ally Salama, who is the Middle East's mental health ambassador and keynote speaker. And he is also the host of the #1 Apple charting show, Empathy Always Wins. And I am a huge fan of Empathy. So tell me a little bit more about the show, Ally.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Sandy. It's quite interesting how the whole journey started, and especially the show. If I can sort of circle back a little bit, I actually started podcasting because I needed a way to reach the people who I wanted to reach. So you might ask, yeah, for those of you who don't know, I do have a mental health magazine. And that was the Middle East's mental health magazine. But what I was failing to grasp is the business sort of audience, the business demographic. We need mental health to be acknowledged by people who don't typically, care about mental health, because those are the audience that we need to sort of narrow the gap with. So I was starting to get into podcasting and listening to podcasts and really, going on runs. And I was like, why can't I do something like that? Why can't I marriage mental health with a conversation that could be about leadership? Because all the podcasts I've listened to are typically about like digital media, leadership, things that inspire me, right? Just conversations like these. And I realized, wow, why don't I merge mental health in the leadership message? And I just started to come up with, at the time, I was really fascinated by empathetic leadership. There was a guy called Tanvir Nasir, and basically he's a leadership sort of thought. He's a thought leader, especially in that realm, in the empathy realm, and compassion realm. Always talks about it. Anyways, I figured out there was nothing being spoken about empathy, let alone just a podcast. So I decided to come up with that concept and name it Empathy Always Wins, in a manner that can allow people to be a little bit more open with one another, more vulnerable, to let mental health sort of sip into that conversation, and make it a youth leadership podcast, just about sort of the journey of mine and the conversation that I have, just like the ones that I'm having right now with you, and share that, because I think that's the message that I've always had all my life. It's just, be a little bit more caring and step into the other person's shoe before judging, and because you seriously know zero about what's going on, or you know what I mean, right? In some person's life, people react in a way that you really don't know the full picture at all. So when you come from that point and you always get the benefit of the doubt, of course there are boundaries. You're not always going to be, it doesn't literally always win, but 90% always.
Absolutely agree. Funnily enough, I had somebody say to me once that she didn't understand empathy and she didn't feel that she could feel empathy. So do you think empathy is something that can be learned?
Of course. It's kind of like, it's a skill. So, yeah, it's a skill. It's a skill. Ever since we're kids, we have energies. You can feel if you're comfortable around someone or if you're not. In many ways, it's intuitive, but in many ways, as we grow up, we lose that. That's why we have to practice it. So in many ways, some people grow up in environments where they're constantly taught to just scrape away from their inner sort of most voice and their intuition. They're constantly told to do certain things, become certain people, and that sometimes allows someone to sort of disassociate with their innermost feelings, because when you're super aligned and when you're in synergy, you can feel someone else straight away. You automatically know that. So yes, there are exercises that build empathy. It's a skill set, and some people are, that's right, some people are born with that higher than others. But no one is if you don't have empathy, you become potentially like like what we see in movies, where psychopaths
Yeah.
seriously harm others without feeling anything, and
Yeah.
that is very dangerous. So of course, that's another extreme, but this is the cost of not having empathy. It's the
Yeah,
cost of
absolutely.
living life like treading on people, and no one really does that. So that realm of where your empathetic skill sets or emotional intelligence lie, that's a spectrum, just like the wellness spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. And do you think also that one of the reasons that people find it so difficult to talk about mental health is because maybe they've come across people that don't have that empathy? I find that whenever I talk about, or I label it mental health awareness, people automatically start to back off because they feel like that we're going to open a can of worms that they can't control. They don't seem to understand so much that you don't have to be a therapist, you don't have to be a counselor to actually support somebody's mental good health, but you do really have to have empathy.
Yeah, I I do agree with you there, Sandy, but I also want to add another point that just some people have fear. It
Hmm.
doesn't have to be about empathy. Maybe that person is the most empathetic person in his family with his wife and kids, and he's the loving father, but maybe he just doesn't get the fact that this can also happen at work,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I don't think it's one thing or the other. I think it's a matter of allowing the workplace to be more than just a structured, bureaucratic environment. Because the moment we start to look work like that, the moment we start to say, "Oh, is this right? Or is this wrong? Or is this?" But if you allow some vulnerability to sip in, um, you will eventually get a workplace that feels a lot more a lot more natural, a lot more like a lot more like family, a lot more, you'll feel a lot more connected, if that makes sense. So
It does.
in
It
many
makes
ways,
complete sense. We often talk in the UK, I don't know about over there, but we often talk about having the conversation about mental health, about saying to somebody, are you okay? But one of the things that I like to emphasize is those conversations need to flow naturally. It doesn't need to be set up.
yeah,
And if the understanding is there in the workplace and the openness is there in the workplace, if somebody's had a rubbish weekend and they come into work, you can tell straight away because you know what their energy is normally like. And
absolutely,
straight away, it opens up that conversation.
absolutely. Yeah, and that's exactly what I was saying. Like, I definitely think, the focus, of course, on making people a lot more vulnerable at work is great, and focusing on being more empathetic is great. But I think the most important thing is focusing on what work really means to people. That is the most
Mhm.
important thing, because if we focus on creating that shift in the perspective of what work really means, people will start to feel different whenever work comes up. Whenever they do have work, people will start to produce different results, operate differently, and thus you will find that as an outcome.
Mhm.
Because if you tackle the root cause of why people aren't having those conversations or aren't feeling comfortable, you're not kind of giving it an advil, right? You're kind of going in and seeing, hey, what's actually going on here? And I think what's going on here is that people are not either enjoying work, are not being totally fulfilled at work, or are not really getting what they're supposed to get out of work. And if we work on what's happening there, and if we have people coming and seeing, okay, you're definitely doing what you don't like and your boss doesn't care. So actually, like, fixing that will allow people to feel a lot more fluid at
Yeah,
work. And of course, when
absolutely.
people
And
feel
again,
fluid,
it comes down to having those conversations and having those conversations on a regular basis. I think people's
100%.
perspective of what they're doing changes. Their expectation of themselves changes as they get comfortable in a role. Maybe they want more. Maybe they want to stay as they are. And I think it's about
Yeah.
constantly talking about it.
Well, here's the thing, Sandy. Like when I said about like going in and making those changes and eventually creating that fluid environment where people by nature will be vulnerable. When you come to really become very practical about it, say you get you and your boss and you have this conversation between a consultant or between someone who's actually going in to do that fixing, that's going to be a very vulnerable conversation. That it may very well be the conversation. Well, why are you talking to me like that? Well, I don't like it when you do this. Well, this makes me feel that way. Eventually, like you kind of know where I'm going, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Ali, we have about sort of a couple of minutes left, and I have to ask you, from our conversation last time, how's your Arabic coming on?
My Arabic is good. My Arabic is I'm practicing every day. Of course, being here in Dubai right now is it's refreshing. But Sandy, I think that the Arabic versus the English podcast metrics are significantly higher. Like I'm getting 1,000 plays a day in Arabic versus 150 a day in English. Like,
Really?
yeah. And it's not about speaking in Arabic. It's about carrying the message in Arabic
Yes.
because no one either does it, no one speaks about it, or no one can speak about it, or I have no idea how to sort of pinpoint that, but this is the result that I'm getting. So
Yeah.
I feel I feel very responsible now, knowing how significant the need is by a tangible number. What I need to do doesn't mean that I need to just do Arabic. No, it needs to, there needs to be an outlet as well for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're absolutely amazing, going out there to Dubai and talking about mental health, and being the ambassador. I think it's absolutely stunning, and well done you.
Thank you.
What I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, is put a couple of links on the post, where people can have a listen to what you do, and have a look
Absolutely.
at what you do. And thank you very much. And hopefully we'll get to catch up, and we'll do this again in a few weeks.
Thank you so much, Sandy. It was a pleasure. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Take care.
Take care.